So here we are 1 month later after we planted our basil garden from week 1. This is a nice time to kind of look in at the garden and see what's happening with it. And the fun thing about basils is that things happen really quickly. So a lot of this garden has filled in beautifully. So here we have the basils I was talking about, the sterile basils that you grow for flowers. This is Wild Magic, and this is Magic Mountain right behind it. They're both starting to put on these beautiful flowers. You see Wild Magic has more of that purpley, and the Magic Mountain has just a little hint of purple, especially around the veins. But beautiful, big, starting to bloom. This is what's going to bring your pollinators into the garden, so great for your vegetable garden to add these basils. They're also good culinary basils to use as well. Along the front side, we have all this wonderful little hedge of these small growing basils. So this is the goddess basil, and here's red ball basil. So the red ball basil is another one of those sterile hybrids, so I'm going to let this one come into bloom. I'm not going to try to prune it back. When the goddess basil comes into bloom, I will start pruning that one back. So for example, as we go down the row, you see some of this goddess basil is putting on a little bit of a bloom. I'm not going to cut just a little bit off. I'm going to actually give it a nice little prune so that it really does take all those flowers off. So you're really pruning back. And even here, you see where these flowers are starting to form? Don't just cut the little flowers off. Give it a nice prune. You can use that for dinner tonight. It's perfect. All those little flowers, just put it right into your salad. Delicious. I can't lie, this lemon basil's been cut back once already, and I'll probably cut it back again soon because I use that for my pesto making. You've got your Italian and your Genovese basil back here, and this is that Persian basil, that lovely one with that clove lemon flavor to it, so that's a great one to add. I've got our little Thai basil right here, and this is an example. This basil goes to bloom very quickly. So it's time for me to give this whole bed another shot of fertilizer, which I will do later on today. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to prune it back. I haven't been using too much basil yet. It's our busy spring season still, so cooking is mostly eggs in my life right now. That's something that makes people go, oh my gosh, really? You cut that much off? But yes, why not? You can use this for your cooking tonight. Again, you can use the flowers. This basil, you do not want to bloom. This is your Thai basil. So I'm going to prune this back. I'm going to come in later afterwards and I'm going to really give it a good shot of fertilizer so I reinvigorate it, make it back into that teenager. I don't want it to go into adulthood and thinking it's time to have babies. I want it to be a preteen, which means I want it to grow lots of leaves. We've got a couple basils down here. The Ajaca, remember the Ajaca did go in from a gallon pot, so it's big, but it started out twice as big as all the other herbs, all the other basils. Big and beautiful and green. This one will eventually go to flower, but if you get tired of a Thai basil that you have to prune back constantly, this is a good one to use. So this one will bloom much slower and it still has that nice super clovey, really heavy flavor. So this is a good substitute for using for Thai basil if you don't want to be pruning it so much. Finally, this basil here is our Pesto Perpetuo. Here's our basil that will not bloom. So all the way on the other spectrum of all those blooming basils is Pesto Perpetuo with no bloom, that's a Genovese style that's perfect for pesto making. And really stunning in the garden. I mean, you have so many basils that are all purpley and have all those hues of kind of mauve, and suddenly you have bright, variegated Pesto Perpetuo to kind of set off the garden. So you can see in 1 month we've gotten a lot of growth. That was from one shot of fertilizer. After a month in a raised bed like this, just like in the ground, you're going to be adding your second shot of fertilizer. If this was in a small pot, I would have done this 2 weeks ago. So if you're going to come back in, you're going to fertilize, you can now use an all-purpose plant food. We stick with organic because we're using this on our culinary plants. It's a 5-5-5, so it's a general good all-purpose plant food. So now for each little plant, I'm going to want to put the equivalent of about 2 tablespoons. On this big plant I might put more, but on these little guys like this Thai basil, I mentioned that it needs to be fertilized. So a lot of people would just do that, leave it there and call it good. But you remember Dexter ate all the fertilizer that he could get his hands on or his tongue around last week or a couple weeks ago. So really what you want to do, you want to work it around the plant. And we work it around the drip line. So depending how wide the plant is, you may not be putting it right around the base of the plant, it may be farther out. So you're going to mix this in. Also remember, organic fertilizers work better when they're in contact with soil. Otherwise, they have a tendency to lose their potency fairly quickly. You come in, and then you're going to deep water that. The fertilizer's all going to go right down around it, and that plant will be fertilized for another month. So you're just going to take each plant and you're going to do that with it, adding a tablespoon for the smaller plants. You may add, or a couple tablespoons, you may add a 1/4 cup for a plant that's this big. Also, one of the problems we do have with basils, and I had to go in and do a little treatment earlier, was slugs. Snails and slugs love basil. Sluggo is safe to use. It's an organic. It's OMRI certified. Safe for dogs, safe for cats, safe for your children, safe for your culinary plants. So make sure if you're going to be treating for snails and slugs, and around your basil you probably need to, you're going to use something safe to use like Sluggo. So with the Sluggo, the important thing is that you're going to put it all around the plant. You see I need to get in here and do a little weeding too. And you're going to put it so that no matter which direction that snail or slug comes from, it has to crawl over the Sluggo. You could also use diatomaceous earth rather than Sluggo, depending on what you have available. But this way you don't have a blank spot. The snail and slug has to crawl across it no matter where it's coming from. You also want to make sure you aren't putting it where a big leaf is hanging out over, like you don't want it under here, because a snail or slug will find that bridge and they'll climb right over it. They have all night, they have nothing better going on than to eat your basil plants. So you have to be much smarter than they are with that teeny little brain of theirs. They still know basil is the best thing in the whole garden, so they will find a way to it if they can. How often you're going to put Sluggo in kind of depends. A lot of times after 1 or 2 times, usually about a week apart, because the Sluggo will disappear as you're watering. Usually after a couple times you've taken care of the snail and slug problem. It's not something you have to continuously do all season. If you're growing by, say, an area that has a lot of plant material, old plant material, you may have to do it more often because it's almost impossible to get rid of all the snails. But for something like a raised bed, usually once or twice takes care of the problem.